And welcome to Lift FM 98.5, 103.3 FM, and 97.9 on your FM radio dial. And of course, all the programs of Second Chances, we keep a complete archive of them at AdvantageRadioMinistries.org. Once you're at that site, AdvantageRadioMinistries.org, just select Second Chances, and then from there you can scroll through and find the guest of your choice. I think at this point we have several hundred of our programs up there. Unfortunately, the first few we do not still have up there, but we wish we did, but we just did not able to keep them. But anyway, we certainly have a nice collection of guests, and I'm sure you'll be blessed by each and every one of them. And with us, we are pleased to welcome Darryl Hurd. Darryl is the author of the book, The Enemy Next Door. And Darryl, good evening, and welcome to Second Chances.
Good evening. Thank you, Greg.
Now, Darryl, I know this is probably a little different of a question, but it's always interesting how the Lord sends different guests to us. And in the case of you, tell us how you came to find me.
Well, that's a really interesting story because, and I'll try to be brief. I know Joe Burke, who owns Lift FM, and I've known him for a number of years. We had become very close friends. I used to do a radio program called The Intro. The Intro was a music program syndicated, and when I first started producing the program, it was the content of the program was all unsigned Christian artists, and our purpose was to provide Christian rock music to teenagers who were listening to the rock venue, but not, or the rock format, but not having uplifting words.
Mm-hmm.
So I sent a copy of the program over to Joe, and he heard it, and he called me back, and he said, "Hey, I like this, and I believe in what you're doing, so I think I'd like to put it on the station." So that's how I got to know Joe. Well, 2 years ago, I retired, and after having done the program for 25 years, that we weren't on Lift FM for 25 years, but nevertheless, Joe sent me an email, and he said, "Darryl, you really need to talk to this guy, this Greg guy, whoever he is, and just tell him about your book, because I think this would be interesting for him to put on his program and let his listeners have a listen to it." So that's kind of how we got to know you, Greg, through Joe Burke, and of course, God just naturally directed all of that because I couldn't have done it myself.
No, nor could have I. But the Lord does bring people to this program in many neat and exciting ways, and we always like to bring up those unusual stories, especially because the reason we put this program really on is to encourage others and let them hear that, hey, if you do make that step and you do give your life to God, all the nice things that can happen in your life. So we just wanted to share that. Sounds like you have a dog there with you.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have 3 very large golden retrievers, and I was afraid that somebody had just come to the door, but apparently not. They were just barking because they like to bark.
There you go. So Darryl, we kind of found out that you're an old-time radio guy, so to speak. You did radio for 25 years, but just for the purpose of myself and all the listeners, tell us a little bit about, where you're from. Were you born into a Christian home? Were you raised in a church atmosphere? Things like that, Darryl, to get us a little more acquainted with you.
All right, just so that you can get a feel for who the author of the book is when you read it, because you're really going to want to know that. I was not born into a Christian family. As a matter of fact, I remember when I was, I was 10 years old. My mother used to take me to church, and I always felt like, wow, this is a place where I need to be. This is where I belong. And I always wanted to go to church. We only lived a half a block down the street from a Methodist church. And so when nobody else wanted to go, I went up by myself. So I've always really felt the presence of the Lord and felt His hand on my life. I went through some, just as we all do, I went through some very difficult times. I've been married more than once, and those are always terrible times in a person's life. So I've come face to face with the enemy many times. I worked for Boeing. I was in the Air Force for 4 years. I worked for Boeing for 20 years, Boeing Aircraft. And during that time, I was a manufacturing engineer, which is relevant because in the book, it talks about the main character having experience and inside knowledge of the 747 aircraft. I worked for Boeing, and during that time, I was laid off numerous times. I was always a musician, so I formed a band, and we played rock and roll music. We played in nightclubs and so on. I went out on the road during one of the periods when I was laid off, and we made a lot of money, but when I came back, we made, I just didn't have any because it cost so much to live out on the road that I decided to get into radio.
Well, you didn't make any money there either, did you?
Well, that's what I was just going to say. That's a great idea. You get to work a lot, but you don't get to make a lot of money. So anyhow, I was in secular radio, in rock and roll. I was a disc jockey, and I held a lot of positions, news director, station manager, and, things like that. It wasn't until I went to Florida and met my present wife that I really realized that I needed the Lord. I needed Him really, really bad because my life was a mess. So we at first thought, we had 3 children between us, 2 of mine and 1 of hers, and we thought, well, the kids need to get into church, which is what I hear a lot,
Mm-hmm.
Not I need to get into church, but the kids need to get into church. So we thought we'd take the kids to church. Well, it wasn't very long after that the Lord really, really worked on me, and I gave my life to the Lord. I got saved, which is kind of unusual because Presbyterian churches don't really offer a salvation invitation as part of their normal process. But somehow I got saved, and then I went from there. I managed a Christian radio station down in Orlando, and then I moved to Roanoke, Virginia, where I was running the syndicated program for numerous years. And then I finally, I prayed about it because I thought I would like to set it down. I'd like to say I've done enough, and I prayed and prayed and prayed. And finally, one day, I really felt in my heart that the Lord just said to me, it's okay. I have something else for you to do. And I didn't know what that was. But after a short period of time and sort of resting, I felt like the Lord said, okay, pick up a pen and paper, and here we go. We're on the next venture. So I started writing the book. And I had no idea that I was writing a book. I really did not. I just literally, as you open the book, you will see that me, by the other name, I placed myself in the book as Pete Simon, who was the main character, which is, by the way, the name I used when I was on the radio. I was standing outside my house, and it was a November day, and I was watching the leaves fall off my tree, and I had this melancholy moment. So I came in, and I started writing about that. I had no idea what I was doing. I was just writing, and my wife looked at it after I got about 3 or 4 chapters written. She says, wow, this looks like a real book. You should continue. So I thought, well, okay, that's good. That's good encouragement. And after another 3 chapters, she looked at it and she said, whoa, wait a minute. Where's the ministry in this? You can't just write this and not have some purpose for it. And I thought, that's exactly right. Where is the ministry in here? Why would you want to read a book unless it was going to be uplifting to you or give you direction of some kind? So I thought about that, and what the Lord directed me to do was we established that the main two main characters, Pete Simon and his wife Jean, were Christians. We allowed them to be Christians. Pete Simon's partner, whose name is Tyne Colson, they didn't know for sure if he was a Christian, so they kept kind of witnessing to him. But the point is that we allowed the characters to be who they are. And when they said they were going to pray, for instance, if you go into a grocery store and you see the clerk there and she looks really down, and you say, "What's wrong?" "Oh, well, my son got arrested today," or "my car broke down," or whatever. You turn around and you say, "Well, can I pray for you?" Well, we all do that, or many of us do that, but we don't pray right then and there. We think, well, I'll go out in the parking lot and nobody can see me and I'll pray. Well, in the book, we allowed the main characters to pray. We put the prayer in the book so that the reader can see, this is what I do, this is who I am, and this is why I depend on the Lord to keep me safe throughout this adventure on the enemy next door. So that's basically the beginning. That's who I am, and that's who the characters are in the book.
Very interesting. Now, there are a couple of questions that I have to ask. It just came from what you said. Let me ask the more lighthearted question first. With a name like Darryl Hurd, being a radio guy myself with a lot of years in the business, why would you choose Pete Simon over Darryl Hurd? I think Darryl Hurd sounds pretty good on the radio.
Well, way back, a long time ago, nobody used their own name. And partly for security reasons, I was in Philadelphia radio in that market. And we always just thought, well, you don't want your real name there because some crazy person is going to look you up in the phone book and then start harassing you at home. So that was the reason. Actually, the name that I preferred was Simon Train. But I never had a chance to use that name. But I've got this great sound effect of a train, for the background. And now it's Simon Train. Woo woo!
Great, that's great. What station in Philadelphia, if you mind me asking? You remember?
Well, it wasn't actually in Philadelphia. We were just outside of Philadelphia at WEEZ, and I do not know what their call letters are now.
It used to be WEZ.
I understand that it's been sold many times since then.
Yeah, it used to be WEZW. 101,
really?
101, what is it, 101.1?
I honestly don't remember. That's been so many years ago.
Yeah.
That was actually my first station, and I was hired as the news director, and I ended up being the station manager.
How about that?
It was a very relatively small station, and they didn't have a lot of budget to hire well-trained people, so they got me.
There you go. But the Lord opened up a door for you.
Yes, He did, and that started many years in radio, and of course, one thing led to another, and you just follow the trail to say, well, Lord, where do I go next? What do you want me to do now? Mm-hmm. And here we are.
We're visiting with Darryl Hurd. He's the author of the book entitled The Enemy Next Door. And Darryl, one more question before we really dive into the book. If you could, since this program is entitled Second Chances, and of course it's all about, God giving us that second chance to give our life to the Lord, can you tell us about the day that you actually gave your life to God?
Oh, absolutely. I think every Christian, every born-again person who experiences a life transformation waits for somebody to ask them that question. It was Labor Day Sunday, 1983. As I said, I was in a Presbyterian church, and my pastor was out of town, so he had a visiting pastor come in and preach the message, and he taught the message about Peter walking on water and getting out of the boat when Jesus called him. And the message was so poignant for me. I sat there and I just said, you're talking about me. I'm Peter, and I'm in the boat, and my life is going nowhere, maybe sinking, and I need to commit myself. And when he offered a call for salvation, I didn't hesitate. I didn't crawl up there. I ran up there.
Wow.
Ran up there and asked for prayer and for salvation, and my life has changed completely ever since then. We used to do drugs. I was in a very high position. I was a program manager at a laser company, and we were in the hierarchy of the social circle. And we had a big home with a pool and everything, and we threw lots of parties, and we did a lot of drinking and a lot of drugs. And well, indeed, it was a miracle, but it was just like overnight. The Lord dealt with my heart. The Lord dealt with my wife's heart. Well, I came home from work one day, and we had a lot of alcohol under the cabinet. And I came home, and I started pouring it down the sink. And my wife came home, and she said, "Wait, let me help you do that."
Wow.
So it was an incredible transformation, and to have. I know I probably shouldn't be making light of this, but when you figure and you recognize what the Lord has done, you can laugh about it. We used to have this little pot of pot, and for those who are really protected, that's marijuana. And we used to have this little pot, and so after we had dealt with the alcohol, I got the little pot, and this is how naive I was. I took the whole thing out into the garden, and I dug a hole, and I buried it. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, well, if I ever change my mind, it'll be, okay, it's in the pot and it's sealed, and I can just come and pick it up. But praise God, I never had the urge to do that. And I would imagine that little pot is still buried in the ground somewhere in Florida.
Hopefully never see the light of day again.
Hopefully never to.
Yeah, good story. All right, Darryl, let's turn our attention to the book, The Enemy Next Door. And first of all, why did you come up with the title, The Enemy Next Door? How did that come to be?
Well, the whole book is based on the concept that there could indeed be someone living right next door to you, or sitting next to you at work where you work, or standing next to you at the grocery store, and they indeed could be the enemy, in the sense that if they are given the order, they might kill you, or they might blow your house up, or they might do something to harm you. We call the enemy these days terrorists, and that's exactly what they are. And the way terrorists work is they don't necessarily want to kill everybody, but they want to put you in a frame of mind where you are too afraid to do anything. And I looked around me. I am a big fan of Glenn Beck and Fox News, and I spent a lot of time listening to Fox News, and all of a sudden it started to occur to me that there were stories every hour, news stories about terrorist attacks, and I started to take note of them and write them down, and before I knew it, the name for the book was very easy, because I thought to myself, well, boy, I don't even know my neighbor next door, or I don't know them well. Maybe they could be the enemy next door. So I put it into that perspective. And the book is laid out basically in this locale. This is Roanoke, Virginia, and our claim to fame here is our huge star that sits on the mountain overlooking the city of Roanoke. You can see it from a mile away when you're flying in on an airplane, but also the Blue Ridge Parkway. People come, especially in the fall, to see the color of the leaves change, and up and down the Blue Ridge Parkway are these quaint, neat little towns. So I established two locations along the parkway, and Meadows of Dan is one of them, and then the next one is just across the border in North Carolina, to give the book character and to give it a homey feel. And I wanted people to feel like, well, these people could really be real, and they could really be living right next door. So that was kind of how that came about.
Now, the subject matter of the book, how did you actually, come up with it, and did you do any research to kind of complement what you were writing about?
Research is not one of my better suits. However, I couldn't help but just absorb it. As I said, I'm a Fox News addict, so while I was writing, I have an office in the house and a television, and so as I was writing segments of the book, I was also listening to Fox News, and one story would come up right after the other. Like, for instance, the Christmas Day bomber, the underwear bomber, Major Nadal who shot up Fort Hood, and all of these things would just come jumping out at me. So that would give me inspiration for the book, but it would also give me actual scenarios in the book.
Now,
A little bit later, I want to touch on that underwear bomber thing because
go ahead.
that's recently in the news.
Yeah, go ahead. You could touch on it now if you'd
what
like.
I was thinking is, all this week there has been new information about underwear bombing. Apparently, there's this guy in Somalia or wherever they are, and he is the designer of the underwear bomb. Well, this week in the news, there's new information about a new underwear bomb that is supposed to be able to get through the security at the airport, and doesn't have any metal parts in it, so it's not detectable by the normal means, and it has a new kind of material that when you do a pat down, you don't suspect anything different. So that's a very real danger. And it's interesting that just this week that should happen, because knowing that we were going to do this interview, I thought, wow, that's just like a continuation of the story.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing that happened just today was I heard that they were talking about a computer program that the terrorists were working on that would actually allow them access, and I've heard about this before, would allow them access to industrial computer controls. And one of the specific things about this, and this was just incredible, is that they were looking to be able to take control of the oil and gas pipeline somewhere. I don't know where they were doing this. And in The Enemy Next Door, we use that as one of the scenarios. There is a gas pipeline that comes right through Roanoke that comes from Texas and ends up in Philadelphia. This gas pipeline is real, and it literally provides, I guess it's natural gas from Texas to the Philadelphia refineries, and it's a major event in our gas supply. So if you were able to take control of the computer controls for this, to turn it on and off or redirect it or whatever, that would be a major coup for the terrorist. So I was really excited that happened, and that was just today that I heard about this. Now, the other interesting thing is, consider if you are a terrorist and you develop an internet program that you can get into the aviation system, the FAA computers, and you can control the information that goes out to the airplanes. Well, this is also a real fact. Right off Fox News, while I'm writing, I hear the guys saying airplanes were grounded this morning from 5 until 5:15 because when they tried to file their flight plans, they would go out to the taxiway waiting for their turn to be able to take off, which is where they sit and file their flight plan. Well, they do this by computer, by FAA computer. And unless they do that, they can't take off. So the whole thing was that in the book, the terrorists are developing this program, and they are the ones which shut down the FAA computers from 5 until 5:15. In the book, the scenario says the reason they did that was they were testing their system, and it worked. And so now they've got it, and they're ready to go whenever they want to. They can shut down the oil pipeline or the gas pipeline. They can shut down the FAA and all the airplanes. They can shut down the power grid, which is also part of the book. We have a major power grid that comes through Roanoke and goes to the northeast, but they could shut down all the power supply from Niagara Falls. They could shut down the nuclear plants and pretty much cripple the whole United States.
Mm.
So that's the part of the action that I put in the book to show you that the enemy truly is or could be right next door. By the way, I just want to take this moment. For those of you that are listening, please get a pencil and a paper, because I'd like to be able to tell you how to get your hands on the book when we're all done.
Well, and that is actually the next question I was going to ask, because believe it or not, we are almost out of time. First of all, how can listeners get a copy of the book The Enemy Next Door by you, Darryl Hurd?
Well, the best way, you can go to Amazon.com, and it's available either in paperback. It's available as an e-book for your Nook or your e-reader, or you can go directly to my website. And if you think of the title, The Enemy Next Door, and take the off the front. We did this on purpose, and I'm sorry that we did it, but just go to enemynextdoor.com. It'll take you directly to my website, and there will be information there how you can purchase it, also what it's about, and you can follow our book signings, where we're going to be located, and all of that is on the website. But it's also on Amazon.com. It's at every Barnes & Noble store across the country, and probably in every other recognized bookstore, but you may have to go in and ask for it by name. It's The Enemy Next Door.
And you said that website to learn more is, one more time?
enemynextdoor.com.
Okay, and it's no the.
No the. That's correct.
Okay. Very good. Our guest has been Darryl Hurd. He is the author of The Enemy Next Door. And Darryl, finally, the most important part of the program is we would like to see if you would be willing to an invitational prayer for those that are listening that are saying, you know what, I was where Darryl was years ago. I'm there now. I want to make that change in my life. I want to have that opportunity that Darryl had to be set free and give his heart to God, so I can run and give my life to God. Darryl, would you lead us in a word of prayer to do that?
Yeah, Greg, and I'm just delighted that you did that, because this is the last page on the book. It's an invitation. It says, if you have just read this book and are wondering about the sincerity of the prayers and the faith of the author, please consider these things. God is the creator of the heavens and the earth. The Bible is the Word of God. John 3:16 says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. Dear Jesus, I know that I'm a sinner. I hate my sin, and I want to be forgiven and released from it. I believe that your word is true and that the Bible is the Word of God. Jesus, I believe that you are the Son of God, sent to this earth to take my sins away. I ask now that through your blood my sins be forgiven, and that I be given a new chance by being reborn into the kingdom of God. I ask, Lord, that from this day forward I will be called by his name, Christian. Amen.
Our guest on Second Chances has been Darryl Hurd, the author of the book, The Enemy Next Door. Darryl, I have time for one last question. Are you planning on making this an actual series of books?
I'm glad you asked, because, yes, this is book number 1 of 3. The next book is halfway finished or more. It's called Chicago, and it's about a terrorist attack on Chicago that will leave you breathless. The third book opens up in heaven. Our main characters think they're dead, but they're not really. They have to come back, and they have to deal with Islamic terrorists trying to take over Mexico.
Okay.
It's a 3-book series, and I hope you'll go to our website and just follow the current dates.
Okay. One more time, real quick, that website, we have 10 seconds.
EnemyNextDoor.com.
And Darryl, would you please come back and join us when you put your next series out?
I certainly will. I'd be honored to. Thank you, Greg.
We'd love to have you back. Our guest on Second Chances has been Darryl Hurd, the author of the book, The Enemy Next Door. Tune in next week for more Second Chances right here at Lift FM.